And welcome back to Digital Trends Live. I'm Greg Nibbler, and thanks everybody for joining us wherever you are. We do appreciate it. We broadcast live here every weekday, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, bringing you trending tech headlines, news, interviews, and discussions. And right now, I'm going to ask you this. Do you like history? Do you like food? What about the combination of both? We've got the host of Tasting History, Max Miller, joining us right now. Max, thanks for being here. And I wanted to start off by saying, it seems like your channel has just blown up here this year. And I wanted to talk about why you started it. What was the inspiration behind this?
Yeah. First, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. It's funny. I actually started it because a friend at work. I would always be bringing in dishes to work, usually baked goods. I'd always had some sort of historical story or whatever, and I would bring them into work. And last Christmas, somebody said, maybe you should put these online, put them on YouTube, and tell other people about them. Perhaps, that's a way to get me to stop lecturing my coworkers. And then, when the whole COVID thing hit, it just kind of was perfect timing and gave me the time and bandwidth to do it. I had kind of started doing it before that, but when I got furloughed from my job, that really let me get going.
Well, and I think it's just such a unique thing too, going back through and finding like these old recipes. Like, what's the process like for this? And maybe we could talk about a couple of them specifically. I know one of the recent ones was like a quesadilla.
Yeah. So I have a collection of old cookbooks, but the nice thing is now that I've started the show, people are sending me old cookbooks and old recipes. So there is no want for content out there because people have been writing down recipes for, thousands of years. So I go through and I pick things that interest me, or I pick a period in history or a story that I want to tell and find a food that I can kind of connect to that. And with the quesadillas, I love quesadillas. I live in Southern California, so, Mexican food is omnipresent here. But this recipe was just different enough. It was from the 1830s, so it was just different enough from our modern day quesadilla that it kind of opened the door to have a discussion about the history of maize in Aztec culture. And so that's kind of what I do. Basically, whatever interests me, I assume is going to interest other people. So it's a pretty easy process.
Well, and talking about the interesting side too, this combination of history, I know there's some interesting anecdotes that you've discovered. I know there's one about brie in particular when you're doing an episode on that. Maybe if you could tell us about that one.
Yeah, so one of my favorite little stories that I've found is when King Louis and Marie Antoinette were fleeing from Paris, just, during the French Revolution. They were going to one of their chateaus to be safe, but they kept kind of stopping along the way. And one of the stops was because Louis wanted to have some brie and wine. And on his stop to have a little snack, the people caught up with them and put him in chains and took him back to or fetters and took him back to Paris, where he was then executed. So it's just kind of funny that, if he hadn't had this absolute love of cheese and wine, so French, perhaps, the monarchy would still be alive and well today. Probably not, but at least it would have put it off for a little while because he would have made it safely to his chateau.
Right. That is so funny that it's wine and cheese that's got him killed
Right.
in the end. Looking at this and all of these different things that you've been creating so far, and I want to remind everybody to go there on YouTube and you can watch all the videos, and they're really great. What's something that I guess that you want to make that you haven't been able to maybe find the right ingredients for yet?
Yeah, so something that I want to make is, and part of it is that it's hard to find the ingredients, and part of it is a little ethical struggle within myself. But I would love to make roast swan, which is kind of the quintessential Renaissance Tudor era fantastic cuisine that you see in pictures, where it's the whole swan, feathers and all, sitting on a table, and underneath it is a cooked bird. So I would love to do that. One, I don't think that my oven here in my apartment is big enough for a swan. And two, I'm not sure where to get a swan. And three, I don't know that I could cook a whole swan. It would just pain me. But one of these days, I would love to figure out how, in the most humane way possible, I suppose. So because the history around those feasts is so fantastic that it would be cool to do.
What's the oldest recipe that you've used so far?
I think that the oldest recipe that I've done. So when you use the term recipe, it's kind of what exactly is it? Because I made something called kikion, which is an ancient Greek potion, essentially. But we don't really have a recipe because it's from the time of Homer and kind of the time of, myth and legend. So rather than a recipe, we have allusions to it through Homeric poems and some other authors from the time of exactly what was in it. But we don't really know how it was prepared. We don't know the consistency completely. So there's a lot of guesswork, but that's definitely the oldest. That would probably be 400, 500, 600 BC was when this would be eaten by ancient Greek heroes, I suppose.
Well, it's definitely it's so fascinating, and it's a perfect time for this kind of show as well, just because of the fact that you mentioned with COVID and pandemic and people cooking at home and wanting to do some research and learn about history. I love both of those things, especially the historical side of things, figuring out where things came from. What's next on the horizon? What do you have planned for everybody?
I think that the next thing, we're going into the holidays, so there are just so many wonderful holiday foods. So I'm going to be doing things like a pumpkin pie, which is a pumpkin pie recipe so old they hadn't even added the K yet. It's from the 1670s. It's very different from what we would eat today, and pumpkins were fairly new at the time, at least to European cuisine. And then so many Christmas and holiday recipes, from tamales to the boiled pudding from A Christmas Carol. There was a recipe that came out like the year afterward that was the first time it was called a Christmas pudding. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Nice. Well, Max, congratulations on the success. I mean, it really is a really great channel and thing that you've created here with this. And it's fun to watch these videos and see what you come up with and learn a little bit of the history of it as well. So everybody can go there, tasting history, watch the channel. Max, thank you so much for joining us here on Digital Trends Live.
Thank you for having me.